Greetings and salutations, all you beautiful individuals. It is another epi of League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you for a little bit of week 3/4, maybe 2. No, it's at least week 3. Power rankings for the big 3. We're not doing the LPL today because I can't even put 10 teams on there that I feel good about for the LPL.
No, the LPL is a little bit of a different mess right now going on in that region. Still some excellent teams that are worthy of talking about, I will say, but that's more so a global power ranking situation, not enough in a regional sense. But of course, that means more time to talk about the LCS, the LEC, and the LCK, which, let's be frank, almost all these regions deserve to get a little bit of extra time to talk about what's gone down.
And obviously, listen, I just said about the LPL. There's not 10 good LCS teams to talk about. There's not even 10 teams. There's only 8. But there's still at least some variety to talk about. And even though the LEC has some squads kind of, carving out their space and staying put, most of these are the same as last week, as we've got basically 3 teams that are, if not already eliminated from playoffs. I've got no faith in the 0-4 shifters making any kind of noise towards playoffs.
You don't think that the KC road trip event for shifters is going to be the exact turnaround point?
Might be some more good food for them, but...
Oh boy, yeah, this is the kind of real ugly spot, I will say, about the LEC, and not necessarily about the teams. I think that would be way too harsh, but in the sense of what the scheduling has been and the format of it and who is rolling through as many games as they are. And when you look at how things are scheduled out for the road shows later on, it does end up equaling out, but the road to get there is so uneven. It's so messy within this region that I think that this has really been poor strategy from the LEC higher-ups.
Yeah, and I get the idea of these road shows. They're going to be great. They're going to be a good time. Yes, it's a little unfair. It's just kind of Koi and KC who seem to get them every time because they have the infrastructure, the fans, blah, 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 blah. But feels a little bad for some of these other squads, like SK already playing 8 series, while KC has only played 3. And that's truthfully probably why KC is not in that top spot. Because, yes, they have beaten Vitality, but we've seen Vitality against so many other teams, and KC has just kind of beat up on SK, and I think Heretics are their other matchups so far. So yes, they've looked far and away the most dominant of the squads, but give us some actual matchups so that we can put you ahead of Vitality.
Yeah, that really is the situation now in the LEC, is you kind of have this weird bubble pocket in the middle tier of squads like G2, Movistar Koi, KC, and specifically with KC and Movistar Koi, a little bit of G2 given the way that their start from coming back from first stand was scheduled out and everything else, have just played so few games at this point that you are hard to put them into locking them in, putting them into those top tier spots. Because again, when you do have a team like Vitality, like Na'Vi, that have taken care of what you could only ask them to at this point, and that has been more, you have to give them that benefit, that extra boost in where they are in the rankings. That doesn't mean that you don't envision KC, Movistar Core, G2 being all the way up there in that regard. You're just going to have to wait, and it's going to have to wait until we get through these road shows, and then that last week, which, by the way, going road show, a regular week, and then road show to end out the split is just bonkers ideas to do, especially when you then add in the 2-week break between the season and playoffs. You're going to be having a squad like Vitality missing out and not being in action for an extreme amount of time, heading towards the most important time of this split. This is going to be messy, this scheduling and what it equals out to in the LEC.
Yeah, that's the main concern for me for Vitality is 3 weeks less than the regular season, and their schedule goes no games next week, matching up against SK and Fnatic the following week, and then no games to wrap up the finale. So that's going to be your classic rest versus rest for them as we head into playoffs to see if they can carry this fantastic momentum that they've set up. But when you look at having G2 lower on this scale, I mean, look at what both them and KC played SK all the weekend. KC absolutely dumpstered SK into the ground. G2 got a 2-0, but it was messy. Even the Shifter series was messy. Broken Blade has some of the worst top lane numbers in the entire league right now, so we're still waiting for G2 to fully warm up, and it probably won't happen until playoffs.
Yeah, and that's why I think, again, even in this group and considering the lack of scheduling for KC and Movistar Koi at this point, that's why you find G2 hanging just behind them as well, right? You have seen enough that you know, okay, you're still that contention possibility, G2, you never write them off type of situation, of course, and especially after a 7th place finish going all the way through, we just saw. But this certainly has been a split where there are extra question marks, are extra points of concern that you are seeing with this G2, where you wonder, are they going to get to that level where they can be the top squad within the region? Can they best what we have already seen out of a squad like Vitality? Can they best what we're going to see out of KC and Movistar Koi through these road weekends? That really, I think, is going to be one of the tests that G2 needs to improve upon, needs to impress upon the public here in the next couple of weeks.
And I think both them and Koi, you have lots of positives to look at, maybe some individual performances you're waiting to come to. There's definitely a couple on Koi, but one guy that has not been a concern so far has been our pal Jojo Pian in the mid lane, because his numbers so far, even though it's just a 3-2, it's not like anything incredibly dominant out of MKoi. They've lost to Na'Vi, which is the only reason they're behind them on the rankings, but Jojo has been absolutely insane. He has, especially the laning numbers, he has more than twice as many solo kills as the next highest mid laner with 12. His CS differential at 15, over 20 on average, also has the most assists and highest kill participation among all mid laners. Legit story or conversation to talk about this guy as the first team All-Pro this split, even ahead of Caps.
This is a big deal, and this is one of those things that we've been waiting for. I think a lot of people, maybe the entirety of Jojo Pian's career, but at the very least, people have been waiting for this since he joined the LEC, because I'll tell you, this is not just star performance, which is something that we have seen time and here and there again for Movistar Koi since he's been there. This is superstar level of performance, and locked in right now, the performance that you are able to get from him and the contributions, not just, again, as you said, locked in on his own lane and that individual 1v1 matchup and how that's going, but where that extends into these team fights and the advantages gained for the rest of Movistar Koi. I think that is absolutely where you are seeing Jojo Pian take his performance, take his leadership to that next level for this team, which is a fantastic sign to see for them.
And I know there's still some suspect stuff around Koi, but obviously the potential is there. And as good as Vitality has started, as good as Na'Vi has looked, it does still feel like these rankings are tentative. And when playoffs roll around, the big three of KC, MKoi, and G2 will be coming for those top spots.
I think the real important test here, right, for Vitality is, can you continue to impress as the schedule, lessens and weakens out for you in these last couple of weeks of the LEC? Are you able to maintain this status, this impressive aura around you that we have built, that you've built up so far this split, in contrast to just, and I will add, again, when you're talking about recency bias, that will be there any type of way, whatever type of minuscule to large amount in a list like this, that's going to happen. And especially for teams like KC and Movistar Koi, where you're playing more games and you're having this high profile event with your roadshow, yeah, that's absolutely going to give you that extra bump. But I'm looking for Vitality to still hold strong here and provide those reminders, those flashbacks of why you've built up the record to be what it is so far and hold strong to the end of the split.
So far, the LCK is also following the path of the LEC. And what I mean by that is teams are kind of entrenching in with their positions, and that, whether that's the absolutely perfect KT roster that continues to smurf their way through the middle to low tiers of the LCK, Hanwha Life having maybe some of the cleanest games on the Rift, and D plus Kia being higher than both Gen G and T1, because yes, they did get the head-to-head win against T1 to stay in that third spot, but it's the slimmest of margins. You got them ahead of both T1 and Gen G right now.
That's the object in mirror is closer than it appears type of situation for D plus Kia. Yes, you've got the lead. Yes, you are ahead of both Gen G and T1, and even with those head-to-heads, you better be worried about them behind you because they are absolutely waking up and starting to get more so into that familiar form that you would want to see from these top teams in the LCK. The problem for them is that's an occupied territory currently with, as you laid out, a perfect KT roster, which I can't even decide what has been most unlikely so far in this LCK split, having Gen G and T1 in the middle tier or having KT undefeated pretty much at the top of the tier, and what they have been able to do. Hanwha Life right up there as well, and then D plus Kia. So yes, having that top three occupied by no Gen G or T1 is an incredible change in the LCK. Not one I'm expecting to last until the end of this split, though.
Yeah, and listen, Hanwha Life being up here is expectation, right? Even though they had the abysmal LCK Cup, this is a team that was supposed to be the final part of that three-headed dragon at the top. KT is obviously the much wilder start, them still staying perfect. And even though Nongshim has a worse or a better record than those 3-3 squads, you're still a tentative feel good about Nongshim. Even BNK, if they get even close to what they were getting in Split 1, you're going to put them ahead of Nongshim. But still, remember, it's the bottom 5 that are going down to the Fries group after this one, which means some combo of Nongshim, BNK, or one of these 3-3 squads are going to be falling to that bottom.
Yeah, so that absolutely is one of those situations where it is so crucial in this next week period to find a way to climb or to solidify yourself in that top 5 and protect against that. Because as we've seen, even if you're getting absolutely walloped all the way through that split, it is worth being in that top tier. That competition that you are forged in fire against does end up being something that can raise your own power level towards the end of the year. So that is a valuable thing in the LCK. You don't want to find yourself in the other end of that spectrum in regards to where you'd be playing with the Rise group.
Especially now because Hanjin Briand and the DN Supers, they look bad. Like that's barely scrim quality practice you're going to be getting if you're matching up against them multiple weeks time and time again in that Rise group.
And I can't decide whether for, again, T1 or Gen G, it'd be more important to make sure you're not in that type of situation, that's not your practice competition before you'd eventually have to go up against whatever in that top tier to try and make that Worlds run and everything else. So yeah, very much so that situation. But at the same time, you're looking at squads like Nongshim, BNK. That is extremely valuable type of thing if you are able to upset one of these Gen Gs and T1s to secure that spot in the top group. And that's still possible for those squads. I don't think it's likely by any means, but absolutely possible. And specifically for me, yeah, Nongshim, we've seen stabilized performances from Scout, I think you could call it, to some degree for the team and what you've seen from them. And as well with BNK, I think they have stabilized themselves since that rough start coming back from First Stand. But is there enough time for them to get back into one of these prime positions in the LCK? I think that's really going to be the test.
FearX, it's this is the do or die, the make or break week for them because they're matched up against KT and T1. And obviously they're gonna not be favorites current form in either of those matchups, but you have to at least win one of them. Because if you drop to 2-6 at this point, like write it in, you're in Rise Group next split.
And I don't know if you are BNK, who do you really a target in this situation, right? Who are you circling that this is the marquee matchup of our week type of situation? Is it that head-to-head against the perfect KT roster where you would, maybe envision that maybe they're not all that cracked up that they're supposed to be with this record, which I'll warn you, I think they are pretty true to the record that we have seen from them so far in the LCK? Or do you identify in on T1 and try to find that same strategy, same mojo that you were able to upset them within that first split? I think that has to be the avenue right now, as crazy as that sounds, going up against the history of what this T1 roster is capable of. I think you got to go with what is happening in the current form in the LCK right now, and that to me would be the series I would identify and target prepare for if I'm BNK.
Yeah, and despite KT having the far better start than T1, obviously 6-0. In terms of confidence for another team, I think T1 still has that aura that if you come away with a head-to-head series win against them, Even if you're giving KT their first series loss, you might value the T1 one a little bit higher.
Well, especially because, again, as well, that's more so the one that is directly in front of you as far as making sure you're
really,
not in this bottom
five. Better than BNK.
Right, so that's exactly where not only is there that previous history that you can hopefully dig in and rely upon and find for extra motivation and value, but you also have the importance of just this individual matchup as far as standings and where that will catapult you, win or lose type of thing. So yeah, that to me is the signature matchup that you got to be looking at for in the LCK this week.
Main thing, though, on this list is KT and Hanwha are very much in a different tier right now than the other, even middling 3-3 squads, who are obviously chock full of former LCK and world champions. The same three from last week, Cloud9, Team Liquid, and Lion Gaming, staying put in that same order. C9 and TL have the same game score so far, but obviously it has... Team Liquid had a pretty good weekend. Cloud9 completely destroyed Disguised, and that's why they're so low on this list. But you're not feeling 100% about either or any of these top three.
No, I think you're only 100% that this more or less is the top three within the LCS. I think that is something you can be relatively very confident in. But as far as the jumbling game, as far as who's number one and who's pushing, above the other one situation, I don't think it's as clear cut in any type of situation. I think this is one of those ones where you can envision different avenues, different styles of the game, and what your preference is, what you feel is more in tune with the meta right now and what you can do and what is capable. I think that's where you can choose some of these squads. And I think, again, just all those things combined with how dominant they were against even a lowly opponent like Disguise, that's where I would throw Cloud9 in that really number one spot for me. But again, that's a very tentative number one given their performance and given what you could see from the rest of Team Liquid and Leon as well.
And I hope everybody sold their Disguised stock after that first week, because the last two series have been pretty abysmal out of them, so much so that winless Dignitas squad we've got ahead of them, because at least they played Lion and Team Liquid back-to-back and picked up games in those series against the top dogs.
Yeah, you got to give them at least 1 point type of thing here, and I don't think you're getting even a single point if you're Disguised in the way that things have played out so far. And it's unfortunate because I think both of us talked about this before, that yes, there's excitement and positivity around Disguised and Disguised Toast being involved within the LCS, but at some point, you got to start delivering. You got to start competing, got to start being one of these real deal squads, and we haven't seen that come through in almost any iteration of Disguised, and I don't think we're going to get that this year. So it still is kind of what feels like, yes, you've got Toast involved, cool, but it's dead weight as far as a team goes within the standings and anything else.
So now with them kind of falling back, you look to these other 1 and 2 squads, a trio of FlyQuest, Sentinels, and Shopify, and now we're left going, okay, well now who are we feeling like can actually step up and at least punch up a little higher to that next weight class? So we have Shopify as the highest of them at the 4 spot, and they got some nice early game leads against Lion. Contracts was like 2 levels ahead of Inspired at some points in this series, so way more positives to take from Shopify than last split for sure. But Sentinels just had the best series against FlyQuest, but there's more question marks than excitement for all 3 of these squads right now.
Yeah, a lot more question marks than excitement for all 3 of these squads. I think start with Shopify Rebellion, as you laid out, being kind of one of these ones that you maybe have just the slimmest of margins more confidence in than the other ones in this territory. And I think that comes from maybe still holding out for more potential, more explosive play from Zynie in the mid lane. I think that's something that you can, bank on or aspire to see from this squad and what they're capable of. And Contracts, again, as you laid out, had that strong early game. There is the potential still for the Shopify team, and I will buy into what DeMonte has said on the broadcast recently, talking that he feels they're really close, that they are just a couple little tweaks here or there from getting into that optimal form for them. And given the landscape of the LCS, why not? wait and see that play out from a squad like Shopify in this position right now. I think for me, the disappointing part of this one is FlyQuest being below Sentinels.
Yeah.
That's still one of those ones where I think their recent performances have left you wanting so much more that's where they fall into this one behind Shopify and Sentinels.
Especially after the highs of completely dismantling Disguised. You said, okay, this is next up for FlyQuest. They're in that next tier. They get brought back to reality in that Sentinel series. But Shopify, real quick, last split, this was it. Their season was over. They played 3 best of 3s and it's over. We're still here going, okay, we're seeing the growth, we're seeing positive signs, but that was it for the lock-in. So God bless, at least they get to play more games this year so we can see Ziny continue to develop.
Yeah, and that is really the big thing here, and why you, again, can more or less throw Shopify just that whatever amount ahead of both of these squads is you have that runway room to envision an improvement, to envision continual growth for this group, something that just wasn't a luxury that you'd be afforded last split in the situation, the way the scheduling and formatting worked out in that one. So yes, I think that all combines into an avenue where still remaining hopeful for a squad like Shopify at the very least in this middle tier of the LCS.
And for the top 3, unfortunately, we got to wait until week 6 into May before we get another head-to-head between these top 3 squads. Obviously, Cloud9 and Lion kicked the season off, but going to be a while before we're testing the hottest of metals in the LCS.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a little bit of a disappointment. I don't know if that's just a product of the general strength of the LCS right now and what you're going to have to go through for various stretch within the scheduling. But it certainly is going to be one that I think for the LCS diehards is going to feel deflating, right? Not having these type of premier matchups going on, and especially in that situation where you're keeping track of the global scene, not getting those type of premier matchups where you can add big points to your top tier teams and how they're going and how you feel about them. That's certainly going to be something that isn't going to be replicated within these other regions, and you're going to feel that pressure when you're hearing us talk about the LEC, the LCK, and even the top dogs in the LPL at that point.
You're not getting huge global power ranking boosts for beating up on Dignitas or Disguise. Sorry, LCS. That's just the name of the game. But that is it today for Liga Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you, absolute stunners. Thanks for hanging out as always, and we will catch you on that flippity flip.